Welcome back, guys. So today I thought I'd do a video on obviously what it's like owning an R34 and living with it day to day. I'm not sure many people have made a video like this before, but I just kind of wanted to go into a bit more detail as to what it's like actually owning one, and obviously why someone would choose this car over a regular car, so to speak. A lot of people have this misconception that they're very expensive to own, servicing and upkeep and things like that, and that's just complete and utter falsities. So we're going to go into a bit more detail now as to how much it costs to obviously own one of these and obviously maintain it and things like that. So where did the love for the GTR start, or the R34 in general? It was made popular by games such as Gran Turismo, obviously 1 through to, I think they're up to 7 now. That's really the only taste of where a lot of people got the GTR from. Sorry for the picture quality, but it's pretty hard to find pictures of the old game consoles without them being videos. So that's where the love came from for most of the older guys like myself. Most of the young guys will be familiar with this next clip that I'm about to play, and that's basically what sparked the R34 craze. So as you can see, obviously from that video there, Too Fast, Too Furious did amazing things for obviously the American and international car culture. Made famous obviously by Paul Walker, may he rest in peace. Look, Paul drove a few Skylines throughout most of the Fast and Furious franchises, mainly R34s. There was an R35 at one stage, but basically that's what cemented it into obviously being a cult following, because up until then, us Japanese car guys didn't really have much to hold on to in terms of, I guess, international media videos and things like that. It wasn't until Fast and Furious came out, most people just knew as Japanese cars with body kits and stuff on them as just being tacky and tasteless and things like that. So that basically projected it into, or launched it into, obviously being public knowledge that Japanese cars were cool. The kids that knew nothing about them obviously gripped onto something because they saw the street racing and thought it was cool, and basically everyone just kind of jumped on that ship. The faithful, such as myself, who have always been obviously Japanese car enthusiasts, look, it's one of those things where my brother had an Integra, and obviously in one of my previous videos, which I'll link down below, I speak about the cars that I've owned and what one was my favorite. And basically I remember him dropping me off to the movies that night to watch Fast and Furious with some friends, and he dropped me off in his red Integra. Now, those of you who remember the first Fast and Furious, Ja Rule actually drove an Integra Type R, and it was just like, wow, I can't believe, I didn't even know what a Type R was, but I was like, I can't believe my brother's car is on this movie. It's crazy, and look how fast it's going. So that's what basically cemented my passion into obviously the Japanese car community and body kits and everything of that nature, and the sex spec cars that they came out with in the late 90s, early 2000s. That cemented my passion for it. Not only that, was obviously watching Initial D and things like that basically helped pull me in the direction of obviously being a Japanese car lover. So now you kind of know why people love them. It's a cult following for the R34, not really for the GTTs, but the GTRs. I'm going to be doing a video soon on the GTR, specifically this one here. It's my cousin's, and it's a 2001 R34 GTR M spec. Now, not many people know what the M specs are, so I'll be going through obviously the differences and be doing a bit of a drive with that as well to show you guys the differences between obviously my R34 25 GT Turbo and this monster R34 GTR. So let's talk about the first step in owning an R34, whether it be GTR or obviously GTT or GT. First step is buy a Skyline, obviously. And look, they range from anywhere between like 11,000 up to about 49,000 for a fully worked R34. And I'm talking exceptionally worked R34 because that's quite expensive. But once you actually own the car, we'll go into the second step of owning the car, which is basically absolutely nothing. Now, the reason why I say nothing is because just like any other car that you purchase, it will need to be maintained. And that includes regular servicing, tires, oils, pretty much any wear and tear that happens to a car is going to happen to this car. So when people say it's expensive to own one, it's actually not, because if you decide to do absolutely no work to your car whatsoever and drive it as a stock R34, whether it be GT, GTT, whatever it may be, it's going to cost you the same amount as a standard vehicle. You don't have to buy ultra rare parts. A Nissan oil filter, whether it be Ryco or some other brand, is the same amount as what it is for, say, a Toyota Corolla. So the thought that it's adversely expensive is pretty, well, it's just not right. So the only thing that's really going to be obviously expensive in terms of engine maintenance is potentially spark plugs and coil packs. But if you drive your car, I guess, fairly regularly, they're not going to go out too often. It's not something, you're not upping boost, you're not driving it like a race car, you're driving it normally, I suppose, and the coil packs are going to last exactly as long as they should last. But look, let's be honest, we're not here to discuss obviously doing no work to a car. We're talking about obviously modifying it and doing bits and pieces like that. So this will be the second step, part 2, I guess, and we'll go through obviously what it costs to obviously buy parts and things like that. Alright, so step 2.2, I guess, buying parts, what to buy and when. So like most things in the world, the internet is your friend. It gives you an opportunity to buy things not only in your own country but overseas, and obviously connect with people that may have parts that you want or need. So I can tell you now, from a guy who's not only owned an R34 when he was 20 up until now, when I'm older, I can tell you the internet is where it's at. So sites such as your Facebook Marketplace, your Gumtree, eBay, of course, your AliExpress, things like of that nature, where you just buy parts straight off the bat, is going to be your friend. You don't necessarily need to buy brand new parts. Obviously, you guys saw my refurb video, and obviously the difference between the old exhaust and the new exhaust, which is obviously just paint and polish, really. Things like exhaust, sway bars, strut braces, things of that nature, there's very few parts on them. So apart from replacing the bushings on, say, your tension rods or something like that, whatever takes bushings really, it's not that expensive. So there's quite a number of sites, and generally I found the dirtier the part is, the cheaper it is, basically. So when you're searching for parts and things like that, I'll put up a few pictures now so you guys can obviously see from the beginning what sites I use and where I get parts from. Quite a few auction sites in Japan as well. Postage does tend to cost a bit, but in retrospect, if you buy a part from Japan which is worth $400 and you only pay, say, $50 for it, and then pay $100 in shipping, whatever it may be, it still works out cheaper, if that makes sense. So that is basically my advice in regards to anything. Look, sometimes there are some parts where you just need to bite the bullet and you see a good deal and you buy it. Impulse buying, obviously. So a lot of people, they love the Altia front bumpers, and they're very hard to get a hold of for a decent price. So the story behind my Altia bumper is that I was on Facebook Marketplace. A lady who had a Skyline, I guess, at one time or another, put it up for sale, and she wanted $500 for it. Obviously not a small amount of money, but at that stage I was in a place where I could afford it. So I just basically sent her back a message and said, look, I'll give you $400, I can pick it up tonight.
and she accepted. Same thing with the Nismo S-Twin bumper. The guy wanted 400 for it, or 500 I guess, and again I went back to him with 400 and I said I could transfer you the money. The reason why he hadn't sold it yet was because he lived quite a distance away, maybe about an hour away from Adelaide, so a lot of people were very apprehensive to go and pick it up. So I paid him online, I transferred him the money, and I think it took me like 3 months to go pick it up because I was busy and whatnot, but I knew I had that part. Same thing applies for other things. If you see a part, look, most people on Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, things like that, they're okay, they're good people. So they're not here to try and steal your money and stuff like that. So if you say to them, look, I can't get down there and pick it up, but I'm happy to pay you or transfer you the money, they're more than happy to do that. Same thing with my front guard that I purchased that we went through in the last video. I paid $20 for it. And that's plain and simply, I just rang up the guy, it got posted, and make no mistake, I'm constantly on websites checking for parts and things like that. So it's not just every time I log on I'm lucky with my parts, it's that I do my due diligence and make sure I'm across everything and make sure I've got any alerts that I need for Nismo parts or anything like that. So look, it can be cheaper than what people say. I mean, here's what you got to remember: the moment you start changing intercoolers, turbos and things like that, you are then changing other things. So the whole point of putting an intercooler on is to cool down the car quicker, or up the turbo boost, sorry. Then once you up the turbo boost, you're going to need bigger injectors, bigger turbo, bigger this, bigger that. So that's where it all comes to, obviously costing quite substantial amounts of money. Now, the reason why I won't go whole hog with my R34 and make it ultra quick, so 400, 500 kilowatts and things like that, or like 600 brake horsepower, is because the new cars nowadays are already so quick. They're so fast. So trying to keep up with those cars is never going to work unless you've got copious amounts of money and you can just throw cash everywhere. You're not going to beat the newer cars of today, because a newer car of today will do 0 to 100 in something like 4.5 seconds. If that person then decides to go and invest 3 or 4 grand into that car, it's going to be doing it in low 4s or mid 4s, whatever it is. So there's no point in trying to keep up with the newer cars of today. Enjoy your car for what it is. So for example, my car, I enjoy it because it's one of the last of the R34 series, and obviously it's got a JDM cult following with it. But we'll move on to the next part now, which is obviously day-to-day living of an R34. What it's like to drive, what the fuel economy is like, what people think about it, and what kind of vibe people get when they see the car.
Alright, day-to-day living with an R34. We'll start with fuel economy. Look, to be honest with you, like any car really, it depends on how hard you drive it and how long you drive it for. But you have to use premium unleaded petrol. It needs to be 98 RON or higher, which is the octane rating. Basically, it's about detonation and things like that. So premium unleaded, for those of you who are in Australia, 98 and above. If you can't get a hold of 98, you can add an octane booster, I guess. But look, I guess it depends on how hard you drive it. I mean, a full tank is generally about 50 litres, I think. And look, it can last you up to 400 Ks or 250, depending on how hard you drive it. If you are constantly in boost and obviously revving out each gear and giving it the beans every time you put your foot on the accelerator, then yeah, your petrol's not going to last very long. It also depends on driving style too. If you have to commute a long distance to go to work and it's on a highway or something, it's going to be a lot better than if someone who's commuting to work in the city that stops and starts every 5 seconds because of traffic. So the practicality of the R34 Skyline. Look, I can't really comment on the 4-door version of the car, only the 2-door version, because that's the one that I own, obviously. Basically, it says that it's a 5-seater car, 3 people in the back or 2 people in the back, and 2 people in the front. I'm 6'3.5", so I'm quite tall, and I can tell you that no one that has legs is able to sit behind me. maybe a small child of some description, but that's about as far as it goes. So realistically, if you're going to be buying the Skyline two-door version, don't buy it as a four-door passenger car. You buy it as a two-door, two-seater sports car. Although you do have room to put people in the back. For example, my wife she's not tall. She's like average height. So I guess someone could sit behind her who was also average height, and that would work out fine. But with myself, obviously being 6'3", it's not going to work very well for me. So in terms of the room that you get in the car, look, it's there, especially if it's just yourself and someone else. Plenty of room. The seats are quite comfortable. They are factory bucket seats, and they're a lot more comfortable than the R33 model or even the R32 model. But there's enough room for two people in there, definitely. If you're buying it as a passenger vehicle to bring around two or three people, 3 or 4 people, sorry, it's not going to work. So in terms of being comfortable, it is. If it's just you and maybe 2 other people, and you're not as tall as I am, or even if you're quite short or average height, whatever it may be, I guess you could fit 4 people in there quite easily. For me, it's a bit difficult. The next thing we'll go to is whether or not you can do your grocery shopping in it, if you can fit things in the boot. Can you fit groceries and stuff in the R34? The short answer is yes, absolutely. I'll throw some pictures up of that now so you guys can see, but realistically, I carry around daily. I've got a container in the back of my car that's got jumper leads, chamois, some cleaning products, fuses, a small toolkit, a medical box as well, just in case something happens, and I need to obviously band-aids and bandages and things like that. And I pick up the weekly groceries in my car, and that includes dog food, nappies, things of that nature. Whatever doesn't fit in there, you can chuck in the passenger seat or in the back, which is fine. So in answer to your question is, can you fit groceries and stuff in there? Yes. Are you ever going to be able to fit large items in that car? Look, probably not. I don't know why you'd want to anyway. But if you did, probably a sedan would be much better. The sedan boot and the coupe boot are virtually the same. The only difference is obviously you've got that extra back seat for the sedan, which makes it easier to get things in and out of. Alright, let's talk about driving feel and what it's like to actually drive an R34, be it turbo or non-turbo. I've driven both. I've also had the luxury of obviously driving GTRs and things like that. So I'm no stranger to, I guess, fast cars. Look, to be upfront and honest with you guys, for me, and I may be slightly biased, nothing feels like an R34. Even my MR2, which is a very low sports car, to the ground and handles like a go-kart, doesn't feel like anything like an R34. The R34 to me was probably the last time the Japanese in the late 90s, early 2000s actually went, you know what, let's just make this about the driver. Let's just stick with what works. And what works was a straight 6 turbocharged engine, a rear-wheel drive that handled well and had some get up and go about it. So look, yes, obviously everyone is going to stare at an R34 when you drive it on the streets and things like that. As soon as they see those tail lights, they know what they're looking at, and it's very hard to not notice a Skyline when it's around. I myself, even though I own one, I will still look at whether it be an R31 to an R33. Basically, anytime one passes me, whether I'm on the street or whether I'm driving, there's always that camaraderie where you give each other a thumbs up, and basically that's it. So in essence, yes, I love driving the R34. It feels like a real car to me. The fact that it's still got a cigarette lighter in there, one of those push ones, just says to me that they didn't really try and keep up with what other car companies were doing in terms of, oh no, we can't smoke, we can't do this, we can't do that. They just did their own thing, which I loved. So I feel most comfortable in my R34, even driving the X-Trail that I own, that my wife uses. Basically, yes, it's a large, comfortable car. It's got all the bells and whistles, cameras everywhere, full drive mode, but it doesn't feel like an R34. So I hope that gives you some kind of perspective. Those of you who've never driven one, I hope one day you do get to drive one, whether it be turbo or non-turbo, automatic, manual. The feeling is something that can't really be described. It has to be felt. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I know that was a long video, but I didn't get a chance to do it in one shot. I had to do it in like 2 or 3 parts, so it was a bit hectic. But thank you to everyone who watches and subs and everything like that. Look, you guys subbing makes my day. I really appreciate it. That brings us to the end of the video, obviously. But stay tuned, because we're going to be doing some mods on the car shortly, and you guys are going to be pretty excited about them. Take care.